Home to the world's largest oil reserves, Venezuela was set to play a key role in stabilizing the global energy crisis brought on by the conflict in Ukraine. Many countries, including Turkey, have long sought closer energy ties with the South American state. And that outreach was on display this week during a meeting in Caracas between Turkiye's energy minister Alparslan Bayraktar and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The Turkish energy minister signed 2 cooperation agreements and added that Ankara and Caracas hope to develop collaboration in oil and natural gas exploration, production, trade and services. In December last year, a Turkish energy company received permission to invest in oil extraction in Venezuela. Despite having the largest global reserves of oil, Venezuela's petroleum sector has been crippled by years of U.S. sanctions. Following EU and U.S. bans on Russian oil for its attack on Ukraine, Washington eased some bans on Caracas to make up for the shortfall. But this week, the U.S. reimposed sanctions, citing the barring of opposition candidates in an upcoming election. And now to discuss the strengthening energy partnership between Turkey and Venezuela. Joining me now from Ankara is Eser Özdil. He is a founder of Global Group Consulting, Investment and Trade. And from London, political analyst Javier Farhe. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Eser, Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar has signed a series of MOUs on energy cooperation in Caracas this week. What do you make of these deals, and how important are they?
Ayşe, these agreements are very important because of Turkey's energy supply security. We need to underline that Turkey has a clear energy policy, both increasing domestic oil production as well as gas, as we have witnessed latest discoveries in Sakarya gas field, as well as Gabar. And in the meantime, Turkey is one of the biggest oil and gas importers in the world. So that's why only domestic production is not enough to cover all the needs and ensure supply security. So that's why Turkey, for years, basically, has been actively looking for overseas to increase cooperation in the upstream industry. So that's why after lifting the sanctions of the United States on Venezuela, of course, as among the top 5 oil and gas reserve owners in the world, Turkey showed very strong interest on Venezuela as well. And that's why this kind of agreements are opening new long-term cooperation opportunities to produce oil and gas in overseas for Turkey.
So, Javier, as Eser mentioned, Turkey, which imports about 95% of its crude oil, has sought to boost ties with Latin American countries to explore for oil and gas since 2007. So the question is, has this cooperation lived up to its potential so far? And if not, what have hindered it?
I think the word strengthening, which we used at the beginning of the report, is the right word to describe this, because this is not the first agreement on the energy sector between Venezuela and Turkey. In 2016, they signed a very, very important agreement, which included cooperation in terms of Turkey supporting Venezuela and improving the operations of one of the biggest refineries in the country. But at the same time, the building of storage facilities in the Mediterranean region of Turkey with Venezuelan oil. But also, it goes beyond oil. We're talking about different sectors: education, defense, transport, etc., which amounts to the year 2021 to $850 million. So this is it's gone to worldwide because it's not the first agreement. This is the strengthening of agreements which already exist between Venezuela and Turkey, which has worked so far very well. You must understand as well that when Turkey is helping Venezuela to diversify its economy. Venezuela depends heavily on the exports of oil, more than 90% of its income. So there's a mutual reciprocated cooperation between Turkey and Venezuela, and this is working so far really well.
So, Eser, is trading oil with Venezuela cost-effective and sustainable given the geographic distance? And how could this help Turkey's ambition of becoming an energy hub in its region?
Ayşe, a country wants to be an energy hub in the region should have two important strengths. The one, domestic oil and gas production as much as possible. 2, having very strong production fields across the world. So, as you may remember, that Turkey paid almost $100 billion of dollar to oil and gas imports in 2022, and last year that was roughly around $60 billion. So that's why Turkey producing its own oil as well as having production fields in overseas basically boost its position as an energy hub, not only for imports to its own domestic need, also trading these products in the region as well as exporting to other countries. So this is a very key element.
So, Javier, why has the U.S. Decided to reinstate sanctions on Venezuela? And how would that impact the global energy crisis engulfing the world because of Russia's attack on Ukraine and the latest tensions in the Red Sea, which came on top of Israel's war with Hamas?
That's a very good question. The United States decided to reimpose sanctions because they believe that the decision by the Supreme Court in Venezuela to ban Maria Corina Machado as the candidate of the opposition who won the primaries goes against an agreement reached in October last year in Barbados to organize democratic elections in Venezuela. However, this agreement would help Venezuela to overcome any possible sanctions. And this is a political element. You know that in any trading agreement, there's always an element of politics in it. So this agreement between Turkey and Venezuela will enable Venezuela to break that kind of de facto blockade that exists. The sanctions have not been reimposed yet. There's a threat. It depends how the government is going to respond. So in that respect, what Venezuela is doing is protecting its back against any possible sanctions, and Turkey is playing a very important role in this instance. So yes, so I think President Maduro has already said we are prepared to receive any sanctions because we are well organized in this respect. And I think this agreement with Turkey is going to have a good deal. It's a mutual benefit between Turkey and Venezuela in this case.
But Eser, in this case, how do you think Turkey's Western allies are viewing Turkey's deepening energy and trade ties with Latin American countries, in this case with Venezuela?
So Ayşe, in my opinion, if sanctions are imposed again, most probably Turkey will not eagerly follow all the agreements because all Turkish economy and the Turkish upstream companies, state-owned one, which is TPAO, very well integrated to international markets. And Turkey is cooperating with all Western countries for its oil and gas domestic production, as well as trade. For example, Schlumberger is one of the most important subcontractors in the Sakarya gas field, as well as Wood Mackenzie and other Western countries as well. So from my opinion, Turkey is following very closely all the developments in the region, both from economic and political perspective.
So, Javier, could Venezuela's court decision to bar a opposition candidate from the presidential elections be the sole reason for renewed economic sanctions on the country? And why do you think the United States is so invested in the country's domestic politics?
Well, Venezuela has the biggest reserves of oil in the world. The latest figures talk about almost 400,000 million barrels, which means that Venezuela is strategically important for the geopolitics in terms of the U.S. Last year, the United States, a few senators from the U.S. had a secret visit to negotiate with President Maduro the possible lifting of sanctions. Yes. So Venezuela is far too important in terms of supplies of oil. And you mentioned, for example, the situation in Ukraine and how the shortage of oil could go against the world economy. So in this respect, at the moment seems to be the main reason why the United States want to reimpose sanctions. The question is whether they're actually going to go ahead with it. They say there's going to be a delegation, apparently a conversation between the U.S. and Caracas to discuss this particular issue. Caracas may decide to allow Ms. Machado, Corina Machado, to run. We never know. We don't know if that's going to be the case. But there's still room for negotiation according to both sides. In that respect, it remains to be seen who is going to give in first. But Venezuela is far, far too important for the oil supplies in the world for the U.S. to just totally turn its back on Venezuela.
So, how would renewed sanctions on the country's oil and gas sectors affect its already ailing economy in the future, and what would that mean for the global markets?
I think the last one was very important, the impact on the global oil markets. It's not a coincidence that the United States lifted the sanctions just after the war in Russia and Ukraine. because the most important topic in the Western world is to cut as much as possible the exports of the Russian oil to international markets. And international markets are still quite volatile and fragile in terms of price sensitivity. And that's why, in order to fill the gap of the Russian oil, Venezuela brought back to the game. And from my opinion, United States just wants to increase its hand for the negotiations and in order to impose more democratic elections in Venezuela. And when it comes to sanctions, we should keep in mind that there are different layers of the sanctions and there are different colors. Like in the famous movie 50 Shades of Grey, there are different shades of the sanctions as well. So from my point of view, right now, it is not possible to 100% impose all the sanctions back on Venezuela. Just could be some quotas, some limitations, some cuts from importation in daily volumes, etc.
Yes.
But definitely, the United States wants to raise its hands versus political negotiations. It's clear.
So Javier, I need a very quick question, a quick answer for this. We all know that China and Russia are also present in the region. Is a new front forming against the US and its allies in that part of the world?
Well, it's obviously that what they all have in common is the opposition to U.S. external politics. However, there's a difference between Turkey and China and Russia. Turkey's cooperation with Latin America, in this particular case, Venezuela, is reciprocal. They are both benefiting. Russia is more interested in the political side of it, and China is more interested in the raw materials, that, especially the mining sector, that can help the Chinese economy. In the case of Turkey, Turkey has a well-developed manufacturing sector, which is helping countries like Mexico, for example, countries in Central America and countries in Venezuela to diversify their own economy. So the role, as far as I'm concerned, is not because I'm talking to you guys in Turkey. The role that Turkey plays in Latin America, in this particular case in Venezuela, is much more relevant to the region than China and Russia. So in that respect, but also don't forget, this is important, Venezuela has signed agreements with different oil companies in other parts of the world, like Indonesia, for example.
Yes.
So there is a wide range of possibilities Venezuela has to break any blockade and to counter-attack, if that is the right word, the U.S. Sanctions against Caracas.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.